All right. We are, I did it twice, MAPD714 in the fall 2017 semester. That's iOS development. We are lesson 1, part 1, and it's 9:30. I can't believe it took us 3 hours to set up and to talk about Mac and the cult of Mac and how you have to love Mac, right? And now we're going to get to our first little PowerPoint. I've also set up Slack. We set up GitHub. You should have already signed up to GitHub. All this kind of stuff should be there. We talked about how to use your terminal, how to set up your Xcode project on your desktop with your the folder for Xcode projects. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through that PowerPoint really, really quickly. I'm going to put this PowerPoint up later on tonight, up on eCentennial. So that's where we're going to put our PowerPoints. I'm not going to put it up on Slack. It'll be for everybody. You can see it. But really what we're going to be using is this book, Beginning iPhone Development with Swift 3 for now. What do I mean? Why am I saying it for now? Because next week it's going to be iOS 11 with Swift 4, right? That's just how it goes. That's how we roll. There probably won't be a book about this until probably either the end of October, beginning of November timeframe, or until we hit the new year, right? For the next version of iOS. So for us, sorry? They have it, but not everything that we need. So that's why I can't do everything at once. So I want to kind of put a book together that you can follow. That's why I'm suggesting this book. You can find it on Safari Books Online. Some free resources out there. You don't have to download the book and steal it. There are resources that are out there, especially on Toronto Public Library, if you have a Toronto Public Library card, or even through Centennial College, where you can actually access Safari Books Online. And this book, Beginning iPhone Development with Swift 3, will be there. All right, so really what we want to do is develop our first Hello World project. I'm not going to go through every slide. There's 67 of them. We only have 60 minutes. There's no way I can go through one slide per minute, so I'm going to skip some of this stuff. I want you to use this as your backup or your reference material, okay? But what I'm going to do now is set up Xcode or go to Xcode for the first time. So how do I go to Xcode? The best way, if you can, is through your Finder, go to Applications on the left, right, and scroll all the way down. Now, Xcode should be on your machine. Here it is right here under Applications. You can also find it through Command-Shift or Command-Space, I mean. And if I type in Xcode, I don't want this one. I don't want Xcode Server Builder. I want to go down here where it just shows Xcode. One of the two ways is okay, right? I've also put it up on Developer. If you look at the Mac that's here in the lab, you can go to the Developer and you should see Xcode. Those are the 3 ways you can get to it. When you click on it and launch it, it should bring up this screen. Let's do this together. So today, we're not going to really do too much Swift yet. I just want you to make a basic app, and we're going to explain some of this stuff, and then we'll end it for today. So first thing I want to do is there's 3 things you can do here. Check out an existing project. Get started with a playground. A playground's really great for, I'm not going to do this yet, don't do this. It's really great for testing things for iOS, macOS, tvOS, and it's a little playground that you can do with Swift. I'm going to cancel this one. You can also do, we're gonna hit playgrounds another day, but create a new Xcode project is what we want to do. So go there, click create a new Xcode project. All right, when you get to this point, notice that there is a lot of little tabs here. If you're making something for watchOS, tvOS, macOS, if you're doing something cross-platform, you can do something there as well. These are all the tabs. You want to hit iOS, which is what we're developing, right? Notice that there are a lot of different templates. These templates are almost like preset projects that give you some extra stuff. They set your project up in a certain way. For now, all we want to do is set up a single view application, Now, if you've never taken if you don't know anything about Model View Controller, it is a design pattern when we design software applications, Model View Controller, before we go into a single view application, all right? We're going to talk about it in the book a little bit, and I'm going to talk about it definitely next semester more, right? but I want you to think about it like this. The design pattern model view controller, the way it works is this. You have your view. Think about your view as your user interface, okay? You have your controller, the logic behind the view. And then you have your model. The model is actually a connection or actually describes your data. That's what it does. So your model is a piece of code. It's a class that describes your data. And then your controller describes your logic for the view. And the controller connects both to the model, which is the data, and your view, which is the user interface. So model, view, controller. It's a design pattern that breaks up those three things. Now remember, we talked about you having some prerequisite knowledge in this course. To be successful, you need to have at least object-oriented programming like 101 in some language, right? Whether it's C#, Java, whatever it's going to be. I recommend Java only because you're going to be doing Android programming as well, right? Not here, not in my course, but on Mondays, you're going to have Android programming. Might as well do a little bit of brushing up on object-oriented programming. All right, so that's single view application kind of creates a view with a view controller. All right, the view itself is a user interface. Apple calls it a view. By the way, everything is called a view. So you're going to get confused because, you know, you have a view and you're going to put a view inside of a view and you're going to have a view controller. And remember I talked about, you know, obstacles, you know, some kind of obstacles to get you to stop programming in iOS. It's almost like Apple does this proprietary stuff and it makes you, if you're not a serious developer, they don't want you. And this is one part of it, understanding how to create an application using a design pattern from the very beginning. And this design pattern, people, it's intermediate. It's not beginning design pattern. You don't learn model view controller when you first learn how to, you know, kind of create a variable. Okay, we don't do that. We talk about design patterns and the model view controller design pattern later on. Okay, so we're kind of talking about it really high level right now. We'll go into it later. Next. For over there to get in? Okay, I'll come in there in a second. Okay, I'll come over there too. That's that one there? Oh yeah. I'm gonna take a short pause when the video the reason why I'm pausing is because some people are getting that ugly message that's asking me to log in. Let me log in now. There's like a couple stations here and I'll be good to go. So you can't do it on your own. It's the actual device pass. Give me 1 second, guys, and I'll be right back. And of course, this is what happens when you first launch Xcode. And who else? You guys are good, you guys are good, you guys are all good. You guys are not good. All right, come in. It's only for the first time. And then you don't have to do this again. Thank God I have this password, or else you guys would be really frustrated with me at this point. Imagine we did all that work and then you can't access your Xcode. That'd be really fun. No. I think everyone else is good. All right. Sorry about that. Let's get back to the video. All right. So notice this team. Remember I talked about this stuff? And I said, you have to sign up and all this kind of stuff. Take a look at this. I have access to my team. I have other things too, right? Right? But I'm going to sign at this. Do you have access to team? Yes or no? Right? What does it say? Add a team. Click it. Now, put in your Apple ID, peoples. What it'll do is it'll associate the Apple ID with the team that you just signed up for as a developer, right? So if you haven't signed up as a developer, then you're not going to be able to do this. It's not going to understand what you are or whatever. You can also leave team blank for now if you want to continue. It's not going to hurt you. But if you have signed up as an Apple developer, you will see a couple of options, a couple screens later. You'll get to this, and you'll see this team stuff. This is the way you deploy to a device. You need to go through here and put the team right here. There's also other places you can put it later on. So even if you don't put it now, we can put it later. Okay, let's click continue. However, the product name is important. So take a look at this. My product name is going to be something like, now you can change this for your own. Did it work? Click on that. Come on. Yeah. Don't worry. Keep following the instructions. I'm going to put MAPD, right? 714, and I'm going to, just to make it a bit different than yours, because you're going to put hello world or something, right? And I'm going to put in fall 2017, right? And then I'm going to put hello world, right? You can put in lesson 1, something else other than this. Please don't put in the same thing as me. Notice that my organizational identifier is in reverse DNS order, right? We always start off with .com or .ca in this particular case. You could have put .ca in here because really it's not centennial.com, it's centennial.ca, right? Notice that the bundle identifier is the organizational identifier first plus the product name up here. This product name is what's going to appear on your device, all right? So please be careful. If I'm making a new product, my own personal assistant or something else, you know, then I got to be careful. Whatever comes up here is what's going to appear on the device. Okay, language. I'm obviously going to use Swift, but I can use Objective-C. Objective-C was the original language we used with iPhone when we developed with iPhone and iPad before iPad came out. It's like C, but it's not C. It's very different than C. In fact, we will be seeing it later on. You will not be happy with it. It's an ugly language, right? It's very close to C++, actually. So if you're okay with C++, you're going to be okay, but it's very unforgiving, which means it does not like mistakes at all, right? So that's why we program with Swift, the new language from Apple that they came out with in 2014. Next, you can choose iPhone, iPad, or Universal. For today, let's choose iPhone. Notice that there's these checkboxes. Use core data. We're not going to do that one. Include unit tests. We will do unit tests later on because it's required for second semester when you build your project. You need to understand how to do unit tests. I will be showing you how to do it this semester, okay, as one of the activities we do together in class, okay? Then click Next. As long as everything pans out, it's going to ask you where you want to put your project. Well, guess what? We have a space for that. We're going to go to Desktop. We're going to go to Xcode Projects, and we're going to click on, before we click Create, notice that it also says Create Git Repository on my Mac. I want to click this on, people. Now, remember I talked about GitHub as the Git repository online. That's the online Git repository. By the way, don't worry about it if you don't understand what I'm doing yet. Next week, we're going to do this all again. And we're going to keep doing this every week until you get really comfortable with it. All right? It takes time for you to absorb what's happening here. Okay? So create Git repository. I want you to check this. Notice it says my Mac. All right? Because it's my local Mac. All right? Click Create. Now it's going to create the project on my machine. Notice now I have an option, even though my display name is really ugly, MAPD714 F2017, blah, blah, I can change it here so it's different than my project name. So for example, my display name should be Hello World. What I'm looking at right here on the left, this is Xcode. Okay, this system here. Now your setup may look a little different than mine, but please pay attention and do it with me because Xcode is a beast. Xcode has been developed back in the day when Steve Jobs was around. It's a compilation or a combination of a couple of different tools that they smashed together to make this IDE what it is. Originally, they had something called Interface Builder, which was separate than Xcode, all right? And now it's part of Xcode, okay? So now what we have here on the left is the Navigator, all right? This is the Navigator pane. On the right, you have your Inspector pane on the right here. Now, there's nothing on here yet. In the middle, you have your editor, and you have your attributes you can change here in the middle. Notice the toolbar has this little Start button. It looks like a start button. But this is the way you build your application. So when you build and run your application, you can just press this, or we can do some shortcuts. Notice also what it's targeting. Right now, it's targeting an iPhone 7 Plus. Hey, man, I don't have an iPhone 7 Plus. I have an iPhone 6, right? You want to target the phone that you want to make it for. For me, I'm going to target iPhone 6. If you actually click there, you can actually scroll to the iPhone that you have, or if it's plugged into your machine, which mine is not, right? Then you can target this. I'm going to target iPhone 6 for this example. It changes my layout and it changes my target. This is the target that I'm using. Okay. Notice the version of my app is 1. My build is 1. And if I scroll down, I'm using my team. That's already put here. If you didn't put that in earlier, you can put it in now. You can actually add an account, or you can actually connect your team here, even after the fact, even after you've done all the other stuff. Here's my signing certificate, iPhone developer, that's me. You might see that with your team, right? You should be able to see that kind of stuff. Here's my deployment target. I'm deploying for target of iOS 10.3 next week, iOS 11, right? I'm going to try and hold off. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to try and hold off from upgrading my version because I'm teaching you with it, which is going to be a pain in the ass, to be honest with you, of Mac OS. I'm going to keep it to Sierra for as long as I can before I go crazy, all right? And then when I upgrade your system, I'll upgrade my system, okay? But for now, we're going to keep to Mac OS Sierra, and it's going to be targeting 10.3 or some version of 10. My device is iPhone. My main interface is main. We can change that later on. Notice my device orientation is portrait, landscape left, landscape right, and upside down is unchecked. That means if you turn your device upside down, it won't work, right? It won't actually flip. I don't care about any of these. All I care about is portraits. Let's uncheck these ones. Right? That means I can't do this orientation. I can't do landscape orientation, which makes sense for a Hello World app. Hello World should just go like this for now. All right, my status bar style is default. I can also make it a certain style. I'm going to leave it as default. I can also hide the status bar, which means the status bar is that bar that comes at the top of your app, little status bar that shows you the battery power and all that stuff. I can hide it if I want to, right? I can also make it so that the app requires a full screen. This is, think about this little line here that I'm highlighted on. It shows me a context here of whatever I've chosen up here on the left, right? And I'm using this folder navigator here. My project navigator is what I'm clicked on, right? There's a bunch of other buttons we're going to explore. Right now, all I'm looking at is my project navigator. And this first file, if I hover over it, is really the Xcode project manifest. It's almost like a map from my Xcode project that tells me all the configuration details here. We see this in graphical format here, user interface format, but actually on the background, it's being held somewhere else as a script, probably in XML, okay? So we see the user interface here, but really somewhere else it's being stored somehow, another way. And if you notice, it has a .xcode proj ending. This is the actual file that's being updated. Okay. My app icon source is app icon. I don't have a special app icon. I could embed different binaries. I could link different frameworks. Right now, I'm not doing any of that stuff. I'm good to go. Okay, so this side is really all your files, and this side is your inspector or your properties. If you're comfortable with Visual Studio, on this side you have your Solution Explorer. Well, my Solution Explorer in Xcode is this equivalent right here. So these are all the files in my solution. But don't be fooled by the way this is written here, because this is not the way it looks in my folder. Let's take a look at my folder for a second. I'm going to switch to my folder for a second. All I've done here is I swiped, because on my Mac, 2-finger swipe or 3-finger swipe, and I'm going over to the next screen. That's why it's beautiful to have a MacBook Pro. In my Xcode projects now, if you look, I have this MAPD714 project. And if I hit in there, notice that this does not look exactly like this. It's a little different, right? Not exactly one-to-one mapping here, right? For example, this group, this is a group, and I can make as many groups as I want. It doesn't exist when I compare from this one to this one, right? So it stores it like this. If I want to look at it from a terminal perspective, here's my terminal. I can go CD, remember I showed you this earlier, and I can drag and drop my project folder and press enter. And then I can do an ls, and notice I have one folder within this folder. I can CD to that folder too, right? And then notice it's also, I've got this master here. This means that this folder right here, this inner folder, which is this inner folder right here, is actually a repository, a Git repository. And if I use ls now, I can see that there's two subfolders, right? So I can do the same thing. I can look at it from a terminal perspective. Don't worry, by the way, if you don't know what I'm doing, just watch for a second, all right? Just so you get an idea of how it works, all right? And this is the folder project right here. So this is the folder, and this is what it really looks like in Xcode. So we're going to really be concerned with this, right? But I want you to understand the back end, what's happening. Okay, so I've got my project here, but there's really nothing I can do. Oh, what about all this stuff here? This is important. If I click on this button, I can hide and make more room for my Xcode stuff. Why would I want this? Because sometimes we're working on a MacBook Air, right? Or something really small, like a 13-inch MacBook Pro or something. And we don't have a lot of real estate. I have a lot of real estate right now because I got this and I got a little bit of that. And you know, at home, I have this massive cinema monitor, 37 inches that I use when I do my coding, right? Because I put Xcode on one side and I have some other stuff on the other side, maybe my simulator. So I lay out my environment a little differently. And by the way, I highly recommend getting a big monitor that connects to your MacBook Pro, if you ever get there, so that you can do your Xcode on one side and look at your simulator on the other side. So you don't have to switch screens. You don't have to do this, you know, this kind of stuff. You don't have to do that. It's just there, right? It's much easier and it's faster from a development perspective. Okay, cool. So I can do this. I can kind of expand and contract these things. That's what these things do, right? There's other things that we're going to talk about over here. Let's leave this alone for now. But one thing is that this is also some other stuff that it does here. If you notice, I have some other buttons that I can go through. For example, this is my breakpoint navigator. And there's a bunch of other ones. Let's leave these alone. The most important one right now is this one. Okay, now, next. I have a couple of files here. Inside this group, this is the group. I can rename this if I want. It's not going to hurt me. I have a couple of files, and they're .swift files. One of them is the app.delegate.swift file. Notice it automatically put my name in there, and the date today, and all rights reserved. Yay, I'm a copyright professional, right? And it's got some basic code, a scaffolded piece of code that came with iOS. My iOS project created this code for me. I didn't write a thing, right? But we need the app delegate file, so please don't delete it, okay? Same thing with my view controller. Right now, my view controller is just this one. Notice that this is Swift. So we're going to talk about Swift next week a little bit, but I want you to look at this. I'm using an import statement. I have a class. Notice that none of the lines here, none of the lines have a semicolon, because Swift, although it's very C-like, it's not C in any way, right? It does things totally different. And there are no semicolons. There are brackets, no problem, to make it look like C or some kind of C-influenced language. For example, you know that this is a method. This must be a method, right? But look, we don't use method or something else. We must use func to indicate a method or a function, all right? So we need this syntax. The reason why I'm overriding is because view did load, the first method you should learn about. This is part of the application development lifecycle, right? So your application, when it fires up for the first time, my view did load method triggers, all right? So it is like an event handler. And when my application comes up, my view did load is called automatically, like a constructor. Notice that I'm importing UIKit. UIKit is the SDK that I'm using for my user interface design, okay? And when I do this, colon means extends. In your mind, if you're a Java developer, I want you to think about this. My view controller extends UI view controller that comes from the UIKit framework, okay? So colon is a way of me extending. And if you know C#, right, it's almost exactly like that. So it's very C-like I said, but it's not C. So it's very similar, okay? This is our first piece of Swift code we've seen, right? Now we know that view_did_load belongs to the UI view controller class, right? And so did receive memory warning. Let's delete did receive memory warning. Let's just delete that. So go in there, first little modification to our Swift code. We're just going to delete that, and I don't have that anymore. I'm going to press Command S for save, just like you press Control S on a PC. Yay! Notice that I got a little M up here. M means modified, right? Because I'm tracking everything. I have my Git repository. Remember, Git is a revision control system, and there's two parts to it. One that's local on my machine, and one that's on GitHub. I'm not connected to it yet. I don't have a Git repository, a GitHub repository. I only have a Git repository local to me. Don't worry about what that means yet. You're going to refer back to this video again when I talk about GitHub and Git next week. All right, so here we go. So I got my view_did_load, and I got my UI kit. I'm not touching that. And then I got my MainStoryboard. This is interesting. Apple is they're so smart. What they do is they use nice words to describe something that's very easy. MainStoryboard really describes my user interface that we can see. It's design view, if you will, right? If you're a Android developer, you're going to see this slightly different on Android Studio, right? So this is what the iPhone would look like. That's what it's basically telling you. Notice that view as down here on the bottom, iPhone 7, even though I'm targeting iPhone 6. That means this is incorrect. Let's move this. Instead of view iPhone 7, let's choose something else. And you can see that there's different sizes, like iPhone 7 Plus, or iPhone SE, or iPhone 4S, or whatever you want. Now, those are the ones they have here. You can also add other ones later on, iPad Pro, and so on. But I don't want iPad Pro, right? I want my iPhone 7, right? You can see that there's different iPad Pros. I'm not even doing iPad Pro, right? And notice that the view controller has changed, but it doesn't matter. What is happening here, it doesn't matter what happens. And I can use the minus and plus. I can use the minus and plus, right? To show or hide my, it's kind of hard to see on the projector here, but you can change this up. Okay, so here's my device. I can choose my device. Let's go back to iPhone 7 or iPhone 7 Plus. It doesn't matter. Notice there is no iPhone 6. Okay, here's the orientation. I want to do landscape. I don't want to do portrait. If I did, I would put it this way. But I want to do landscape. Oh, sorry, portrait, not landscape. I'll be okay. I'm getting to. All right, and on the left, you have the outliner. This is interesting because this outlines what's here physically on the screen, right? So right now, if you notice, there's nothing that appears in my view controller, right? Remember, view controller, model view controller, right? This that's appearing in my storyboard, and this is a file, main.storyboard. It's actually a view. And this view, because of it's a container, it allows for subviews. So here's my view controller scene. This is the entire scene. And here's in my outliner. This is the outliner view, all right? And if I click this, if I expand this, you can see that I have my top layout guide, my bottom layout guide, and my view. This itself, see how it glows blue? This is actually the container that is the screen. So my screen, my iPhone screen, is a view controller. It has a view controller attached to it, which is this file right here. And it has a view, which is the container where all my other buttons and labels and everything goes inside. All right? So all my buttons and labels, they're also views, but they're going to be subviews for my main view. Whew, view. I can keep saying that word all night. View, 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 right? And that's what Apple does. So please don't be confused with view. When I'm talking about this view here in the outliner, it means the main container view, right? That contains the screen, the whole screen, right? Now, if I want to add a label, this is the beautiful thing about Apple, right? By the way, all this stuff is in the PowerPoint, which I'm going to put up on eCentennial later on. I just don't have time. I'm timing out. Notice on the right, this here is my library. And on the bottom, if I go to the library on the bottom right, if I type in label, right, it's going to bring up my label view. label view, right? Actually, it's a control. If you're used to Visual Studio, you can call this a user interface control, or in Apple's language, the view, right? I'm going to take this label and drag and drop it onto my view. Notice now in the outliner on the left-hand side, you have a view. And inside the view, you have a subview, which is a label. Sorry for the language. I feel like I'm swearing at you sometimes. View, 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 view. Make sense? Notice also that it's pretty darn small. And I'm going to zoom in there so I can see a little bit better. Notice on the bottom, I'm zooming. Now, you might see a different layout than I do because I'm projecting, right? And so I don't have a lot of real estate. You might see it differently than I do. It's okay. But here's my label. Notice when I put it in here the first time, I have these blue guides, right? Well, if I use the guides, the blue guides, as I move my label around, it actually centers it as much as possible in the middle of my screen. But this would just be too easy for Apple if it was done, right? I want to change this thing. Notice on the right now, my inspector is lit up. My inspector was empty before, right? But now my inspector has this other stuff up here on the right. Let me just X out of this one. And I'm going to pull this down so you can see it a little better. Okay, take a look. My text is plain. My text here says label. Let's change this to hello world. Oh man, I can't see this. What the heck? I got to open this up a little bit because it won't fit, right? And now I'm going to reposition it because it changed the size of my label because it's bigger now, right? It's got to be positioned approximately in the middle. There we go. Notice also that my system font is 17, right? If I change my font size by clicking this, I can change my font size to 20, but then I got to resize my label again. And then I got to move it around. All right, cool. I've got a little label. And if I kind of come out, you can see that it's going to be approximately in the middle of my screen. Are we done? No. I want to go to my editor. And this is on my editor menu on Xcode, right? And where it says resolve auto layout issues, right? I want to reset to select to suggested constraints. Please don't be mad at me. But what this does is it sets up a bunch of constraints. One of the biggest problems with setting up for your interface for iOS is you need to tell Apple and iOS in your design view what your constraints are for each of the user interface controls, views, that you put up inside your view, your main view. It's got to know because it's got to adapt to different screens, right? So right now, it's going to be my iPhone 6. Tomorrow, it's going to be an iPhone 7. The next week, when I buy my iPhone 8 for $1,200, okay, I won't buy it, I swear, right? Maybe I will. But it's going to be like a bigger screen or a different screen, right? Or maybe it's going to be on like some kind of eyeglasses in the future, Apple Glass. I don't know what they're going to call it, right? But the interface is going to be different, and it's got to adapt. And so we need to know the constraints, the different, and it's going to be usually in percentages. We'll talk more about that as we go forward. All right, so I've done this. So how did I do that? Notice that the constraints come up in the outliner here. And if I undo them, you can see that I have constraints for the top as well as other constraints. Now, if I don't like them, I can, if you hear it, like right here, can I get rid of them right here? No. I can get rid of them in other places, though. All right, cool. Let's test it out. By default, I should be able to press run, but when I do this, it's going to bring up the simulator. Notice that it's going to bring up the simulator that's compatible with my target, which is iPhone 6. If you've left it at iPhone 7, it'll bring up the iPhone 7 simulator. Let's press play. All right, so it's got 2 storyboards. My build succeeded. Everything went well. And now my Apple simulator is coming up. If it's too big, if this is too big, you can go to hardware, right? Or sorry, window, and you can scale the thing a little bit smaller. You can make it smaller so it fits on your screen. Sometimes it's so massive that it won't work, right? So there it is. All right, there's my Apple in a minute. Oh man, what the heck? Where's my hello world? What's the problem? Because my constraints are not showing up here properly, right? It's not showing, right? Even if I wanted to. Now also, take a look at this. I've got some debugging information here, right? I've got some debugging information. UI view encapsulate layout height. Will attempt to recover by breaking constraints. See, I have a constraint issue. It gives you the reasons why it didn't come up, right? And of course, I can stop. There's the play and there's the stop. Let's stop button. If I want to, I can delete the constraint manually, right? Here's my constraints. I can try and delete them, right? Notice there's a top, my top constraint. I can delete those constraints and try and do it manually, right? Notice if I don't do this, I have this little symbol on the right, which is, hey, Guy, Tom, something's wrong. If I click onto this, it'll say, position is ambiguous for hello world, because it doesn't understand where it should be relative to all screen sizes, right? And this is one of the problems we have with the constraints. All right, let's go back. So if I go back to editor, and if you look at resolve auto layout issues, right? And if I click on add missing constraints, and if I go back to do that again, I can also clear constraints. I can do that all from here. So it'll clear them. As well as there's two parts. There's one for views up here, and there's one for the view controller that's up here. Let's do this part and see the difference. Okay, I don't have my little yellow mark up here anymore. This little symbol that says, hey, there might be an issue. Let's try it this time and see what happens. Again, I'm going to see it on my simulator if it works at all. If I don't see hello world, though, right, then that would be a problem. And the reason why I didn't see it last time is my constraints were wrong. Let's do it again. I'll do it again. Yeah. All right, because you guys didn't see that. And again, this is so subtle and so easy to break, right? It's so different on Android. Android, drag and drop, it works, right? You have a, you have a layout, you have a flow layout or something like that, or, and you're done, right? Not so with this, right? It's totally different. We're going to learn other layout opportunities here, different kinds of layouts. Stack layout is the best one, but let's just stop this for a second, and let me take away the constraints. So again, I'm going to go to editor, and I'm going to go to resolve auto layout issues. Hey, take a look at this. Option, shift, command equals. That's the shortcut that we want, right? Let's clear the constraints. And let's do it by the shortcut, right? Option, shift, command equals. Option, shift, command equals. That's the shortcut, all right? And when we do that, if I press, by the way, I was pressing this button up here, but a quicker way is Command R for run. So if I go Command R, it'll run it on my simulator, right? And if I've done everything correctly, you'll get hello world. Option, shift, command equals, right? I know it's lovely shortcuts we have. Yes. Which, this in the storyboard, it's a very good question. The question was, what's this arrow mean? It means that this storyboard is the entry storyboard. This is the first storyboard or view, screen, however you want to call it, that we're going to see. Whatever that arrow points to is the first screen that we're going to see. So if we have other view controllers inside the storyboard, you can have a lot of other things in there, multiple screens, right? For example, if I have one screen as a start screen, I make a game, I have the game scene, then I have the game over scene. Those are three scenes, three little view controllers that I'm going to use, right? The arrow will point to the start screen. Are we good? Did we do hello world? Okay. Every time? Did I do this already for you? I did not. I did it on some, but I didn't do it on the others. Hold on a second. These have it very massive, right? So we're going to go to window, and we're going to go to scale, and we're going to go to percent. Here we go. We're good. I'm going to deal with it. I'm dealing with it. Bear with me. It's only the first day, and then afterwards, I think we should be fine. It's because it's outdated. Right? And I did, and I do this. Don't worry about this. That's okay. Go to your, and I'll press play. And if it doesn't show up, there's something else. Command Shift Option. And then it does all the constraints. See all the constraints come out of the two lines. Not press play. Should visualize your simulator. Go back to it. Okay. Go back and do it again. Go back to the screens on. It should work. Okay, I'll come back to you. Okay, I'll videos running. All right. Same again. Should you do this before? It won't happen on your Mac. Will be perfect. With my Mac. If you buy a Mac, you will work with okay, so that's something still. There it is. You're still good. Oh, this one good. And yes. Should, but you may have to remove them and come back. Okay. All right. So some of you worked, some of you didn't, and I'm just going around. For the people who are watching the video, I apologize. For people who are going to watch it again, you guys are going to watch it again. Some of you. It's because I'm having to do that whole thing here that I can't do. All right. For those people who couldn't make it work, wait after when we're done all this, and I'll come over and I'll help you guys out, okay? So what do we do here? What do we learn? We learned that developing iOS, even a hello world, sometimes not easy, right? Why? And you can ask that question. Why does Apple make it so crazy, right? It seems crazy at first because you're not used to it. It seems crazy, but it's actually, there's a reason for everything, right? And one of the things that Apple does is it makes it so that all the applications They kind of follow a user interface guidelines. That's one thing they do follow. They're not going to break on you most of the time. I'll come over and fix that problem later on. And they're going to follow a certain standard of application development, which is something that's actually something to be admired. Because if you look at something for Android, you can put any app on you want on Android. It may not work properly, right? You can actually download an app that actually gives you a virus, right? Apple won't allow that kind of stuff to happen. And that's part of the price you pay when you become a developer. All right, let's stop this for a second. Let's go over a couple more things, and then we'll end it for the day because we're kind of timing out. All right? So a couple things we learned. One, this is the project navigator or equivalent of the solution explorer in Visual Studio, right? We learned about app delegate. For now, don't touch. Our view controller.swift is linked to our main storyboard. This is the logic. When we make a button next week, we're going to use this view controller to create a link. The event handlers are going to be stationed inside my view controller.swift. My main storyboard is just a graphic interface to kind of represent what your screen should look like. Now, this is the challenge for you guys, for people who have a phone. Try and deploy this on your own phone. You might see it looks different even than the one that you see in the simulator. Why? Because the device is the best way to test, always, 100%. Simulator gives you an idea that it's okay, but the end result is always on a device. Doesn't matter if you're using an iPhone or an Android phone. You must test on the device. It's way better. And we're going to do that next week because I'm going to break out all those devices out here, and we're going to look at them for next week. Okay. Constraints. We need constraints with iOS stuff. Why? Because this interface doesn't just work here. It also works for other devices, not just for iPhone 6, which I'm targeting, but for iPhone 7, iPhone 4, and other smaller devices. It'll target all of them. And it's responsive or adaptive to that different layout, right? We didn't talk about this, assets.xc assets. If I'm going to add any app icons or images, they're going to go in here. And it's going to be a resource that can be accessed from anywhere in my application, right? So I can just drag and drop those assets in here. We're good to go. All right, now, here's the rub. And I don't expect you to do this, but I'm going to use source control for the first time. And I'm going to go, and what I want to go to my master, and I want to configure my Hello World project. Now, I don't have a remote. I want to add a remote. And don't worry about what this is. We'll talk about this again next week, right? I'm going to add a remote. And it's going to be called origin. I need an address. And for me to get the address, I'm going to set it up on GitHub. So I'm going to go to GitHub. I'm going to go to Centennial College. And I'm going to set up a new repository on Centennial College for the first time, right, for you guys. I'm going to call it, just make sure it says Centennial, not me. I'm going to call it MAPD714-F2017. And we're going to make it Hello World. So you can download my project, all right? It's going to be public, not private. I'm not going to add a README file or anything else. I'm just going to click Create Repository. What this is going to do is it's going to give me an address. This address is the remote address. And by the way, there's also terminal commands you can use as well. But for now, we're going to just use the one that's built into Xcode. So I'm going to copy it from here. I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to paste it in there with Command V. Remember, Control V for PC, Command V for Mac. And then add remote. This adds the remote address to GitHub, the cloud service. So I have two repositories, one local to my machine and one that's being hosted on GitHub. Okay? I'm going to click Done here now. Next, under source control, I'm going to make my commit. And if you notice, I've got all these changes, and I'm going to say created Hello World project. And then I'm going to push to the remote. Pushing means uploading. I'm going to upload my project to the remote repository on GitHub so you can see it. And I'm going to click Commit 5 Files and Push. Now it's going to ask me to log in. And I need to put in my username and password. And it's usually the username for GitHub and the password, if I can remember it. If I did it right, that's pretty good. Now let's check and see if it actually went up on GitHub. This is what it looked like before, and now this is what it looks like now. So you can see I've got my files up here, And if I take a look, if I go here to my project, you can see that I've got my view controller.swift file, and you can see that I've removed one of the functions there, right? The methods. Where does this file exist? I'm going to put it up on Slack for you, right? So here's Slack. I'm going to go into my general for Slack and put it in there. And now you can get that project. If you want to download it, if you go home, if you have a Mac on your own, you can download it and you can have it later on. You can try it out and see how yours is different than mine. All right. Wow, that was a lot of work we did. It looks like a lot of work, but actually all of that for a developer would have taken about 10 minutes. We took 4 hours. All right. Why would it take 10 minutes? Because setting up all that stuff, the developer account and all that stuff, if you've never done it before, it takes a long, long time. You have to know where to go. And I try to guide you through that whole process, right? But if you know how to do it, like, look, it didn't take a lot of clicks, really, at the end of the day. It was just knowing what to do. And I talked a lot through the whole time, right? And I also showed you how to use Mac and everything else. But really, it didn't take a lot. So we're going to speed up. Next week, I'm going to assume a couple things. You know a little bit about Mac. You know a little bit about Xcode. We've set up a Hello World project. You know a little bit about Git. You know a little bit about GitHub. You know a little bit about everything, right, so far. You know kind of the environment a little bit. And next week, we're going to actually do some real coding for the first time, right? Please forgive me again. I'm going slow. But it's not because I want to make you guys slow or pull back the horse's reins. I'm not trying to do that. I want you to go ahead. And there's some great videos from lynda.com that you can watch to go ahead, like I talked about before, right? Remember that lynda.com is available to everyone with a Toronto Public Library account. And even through Centennial College, we actually offer lynda.com to everybody, right? And if you go to library, you can see that there's a wide variety of iOS stuff. If I go iOS, right, especially if I do iOS 10, right, you can see there's a bunch of videos on iOS 10 to get you started, right? It's not bad to do this kind of stuff, but remember that iOS 11 is around the corner, and they're gonna be bringing out more videos and stuff. So it's helpful to look at this, especially if you're learning about object-oriented design. There's actually programming fundamentals, foundations of programming. This is a really good look at. They even have object-oriented programming right here, right? So object-oriented programming is, there's a bunch of videos with object-oriented programming, understanding object-oriented programming with Python, and it doesn't matter what you use. There's even with Java, essential training for students, designing for object-oriented programming. It's good to understand these things, some really cool videos here. And the reason why I'm bringing up lynda.com is because, in my opinion, it's really good to have a base before we do this stuff together, right? Otherwise, what's going to happen is I'm going to talk about something that you're not going to understand, and it's not going to click. But if you've already done a little bit of pre-work, when I talk about it, you're going to like, oh yeah, I remember that. I get that now. And it's going to be a little bit easier for you to absorb everything. Otherwise, I'm going to throw stuff at you every single week. There's going to come an assignment. By the way, you'll have to do with a partner or two, right? And then you're going to have to look at the videos again, right? And that's why I do these videos, because it doesn't matter how slow I go, it's not slow enough. Questions before we end for the day? I think we've done a lot of stuff today. Or it seems like we have. Can you get a? Okay, yeah. Yeah, so for me, like I said, if you have a Toronto Public Library, I'll give you the link. So for the link for Toronto Public Library is this one. I'll put this up on Slack. If you have a Toronto Public Library card, all you need to do is take this, this link, put in your library card and your card pin. It's free to get a Toronto Public Library card. Any library will give you this, Toronto Public Library, all right? If you go there and you say, I want a library card, get your pin, put the pin here and the card number, and you got free access to lynda.com, which gives you all the exercise files and all free videos. There's nothing wrong with that, right? So I'm gonna put this link on Slack, and I highly recommend it. It's really good as a supplement, right, to what we're doing here throughout this program, both first and second semester, okay? There's nothing wrong with looking at extra material. I don't know when you're going to look at it because you're here with us every night, but sometimes we have time during the day or on the weekends. It's good supplementary kind of, supplementary material. It does. It has it on eCentennial too. And if I was to go up on eCentennial, let me go there as well. It gives you a little bit of a guide on how to do that. Let me go up on eCentennial for a second. And is it here? They were showing it earlier. You know what? I will give you the access. There is another link for Linda. Here it is. I just passed it. Click here. Oh, faculty will be able to integrate in technology, but I think everyone has access. The college community, right? That means everybody. So if I go there, it gives you kind of a link on how to access lynda.com. I'm going to put this, oops, I'm going to put this link also on Slack, right? So you can actually, so you don't have to swim through all that stuff. Okay, here it is. This gives you the idea of how to, if you follow that link, it'll give you access on or step-by-step on how to get lynda.com for free through eCentennial. Okay. The reason why I gave you the Toronto Public Library one is because it's good even when you leave Centennial, right? That's why it's a good thing. Questions before we go? Any other questions? Well, I recommend having it, but I have some devices there that I can lend you. So you're going to have access. Don't worry about buying an iPhone or an iPad. I got them, right? Get yourself a Mac. Focus your money on that, right? If you can, right? If you can't, then you're going to have to deal with a Mac in front of you. It's not so bad. It just means that you have to do all your work in here somehow. Okay, any other questions? Guys, thank you so much. We'll see you next week. I'm going to stay back, and you guys, if you have any questions, I'm going to stick around after class.